Okay, so I'm Professor Phil Bishop, Professor of Zoology in the Zoology Department at Otago University, and I'm also the co-chair of the IUCN Amphibian Specialist Group, and also the Chief Scientist of the Amphibian Survival Alliance. So a couple of international positions along with my normal paid job here at the university.
Fantastic. How did you get into studying amphibians?
Yeah, it's a good question, and lots of people always ask me, how did I ever do it? And I think I'm a really lucky person because I've had a passion for amphibians since I was 4 years old. So that's my longest memory, is I can remember catching toads in England when I was 4 years old, and ever since then I've just had this connection with amphibians and a passion for them, and just always wanted to work on them. So I've been really lucky. Nowadays, a lot of young people don't have a passion, and they go through life and university not really knowing what they want to do. But I was sort of very lucky from an early age. I know that I always wanted to work with amphibians.
So why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Okay. The reason why I do this sort of stuff is that it's my passion. So I often think, what would I do if I won lotto? Well, first I'd have to buy a ticket, but if I did buy a ticket and then I won lotto, I would do exactly the same as what I do now. I really enjoy teaching. I enjoy interacting with the young people at the university, and my research is all about amphibians, and I feel I'm doing a really important job. I'm trying to make sure that amphibians don't disappear, so that everyone's grandchildren will be around and they'll be able to see amphibians, and they won't be saying to their dad, "Oh, what did you do when the amphibians went extinct?" So we've got to save the amphibians, and I spend most of my spare time and any other time I have when I'm not teaching is trying to find out different ways of saving amphibians.
So what makes amphibians so important?
Well, so amphibians have a really important role in the ecosystem, and when you look at typical food webs, you find that amphibians sit somewhere in the middle. So they keep a lot of the invertebrate prey down, which is their main source of food, and in turn they feed a lot of the other animals like snakes and mammals and birds and reptiles and things like that. They eat amphibians. So if you take amphibians out of that key link, you find that the higher vertebrates, as we call them, would have to eat the invertebrates, and a lot of them don't like to do that. So potentially, if we removed amphibians, we'd end up with an ecosystem collapse. And we've had some insights into this in places like Bangladesh that have exported a lot of their frogs for frogs' legs overseas. And what happens is that they get a huge increase in insect-borne diseases like encephalitis and malaria. So it's pretty disastrous. That's one reason why amphibians are important. Another reason is that they are full of pharmaceuticals. Amphibians live in very dark, damp places, ideal places for bacteria and fungi to grow, but they often don't succumb to bacterial or fungal diseases. So their whole skin is covered with antibiotics, and they've got so many really important chemicals in their skin and on their skin that they're a whole wealth of potential for medical research.
Yeah. So they balance the ecosystem a lot.
Yeah, so a lot of people call them canaries in the coal mine because they tell us when we're doing something wrong to the environment. So if you've got a really nice pristine environment, you'll have lots of frogs and it'll all be in balance. When the frogs start to disappear, as they are doing throughout the world, then we know that we're doing something wrong and we're messing up the environment, and that's the time to take notice.
Yeah. They breathe through their skin?
Yeah, they've got it's called a semi-permeable skin. So their skin allows water to move through, it allows gas to move through, so they're very sensitive to any toxins in the environment because they can't stop it crossing their skin. Whereas mammals, birds, and people like us, we have waterproof skin, so you can put fairly noxious chemicals on our skin and our skin will protect us.
Yeah.
You do that to a frog, it gets absorbed straight away, and then the frog will probably die.
So what's your current research about?
So my current research is really about amphibian conservation. So I've got many different strands that we've been looking at. We're looking at taxonomy in New Zealand because it's very difficult to preserve a species when you don't know how many species you've got. So we've got at least 4 species of frogs in New Zealand, and we had a whole load of extinct ones which became extinct when humans arrived, and we want to look at those extinct fossils, get some of the ancient DNA out of it, and to see whether those are actually different species than what we have today, or whether they are very similar to the species that we have today. So that's one of the projects. The other project that I'm working on at the moment is we have a couple of populations of Archie's frogs up north, and in one they've both got chytrid fungus, which is a really nasty fungus that's been killing off frogs around the world. And in one population they've declined, and the other population they haven't. So we're trying to look at these 2 populations to find out how one can survive in the face of this deadly disease and the other one can't. So we're taking skin swabs from them, we're looking at the probiotic bacteria that live on the skin, and we're also looking at chemicals that they produce. And we'll also have a look at the strains of chytrid in either of those places to see whether perhaps in one population it's become non-virulent, and then we'll have to try and work out why the chytrid fungus has become not as toxic as it used to be. So it's a mix between conservation, microbiology, genetics, and molecular biology. It's a whole suite of things that we're trying to do to make sure that Archie's frogs stay okay in New Zealand.
Yeah, because there's so many factors that would affect how chytrid fungus interacts with frogs and how the frog would cope with it, depending on environment and all sorts. So, what's the most interesting thing you've discovered?
There's 2 things that immediately come to mind. One of them is not with native frogs, it's with an introduced frog here in New Zealand, and that I discovered that it could be frozen solid in a block of ice and then thaw out and come back to life. And this has been reported in frogs before, but only in one species in North America, which used to be this Lithobates sylvatica, which is the wood frog, and that can withstand being totally frozen in winter, and then it thaws out in spring. And people thought that this was just a one-off thing, that these frogs had evolved with these really low temperatures because they're in northern parts of North America and up in Canada, so it gets pretty cold there in the winter. Whereas I went on a school camp here in Dunedin with one of my young children at the time, and we heard frogs calling in the middle of winter, and the little brown tree frog that's introduced from Tasmania is very common in Dunedin, and they like to call when it's cold and wet in the middle of winter. So we heard them calling, and I took out a bunch of young 9-year-old kids to try and find these frogs, and we eventually found one, and I wanted to keep it to show the rest of the students the next day. And so I put it in a little jar with a little bit of water in so that it didn't dehydrate, and I put it in the back of my car, and then I went to bed and forgot about it. And in the morning I woke up and the car was covered in frost, and I went out to have a look to see if the frog was all right, and it was inside a block of ice. So the water that I'd put in with it had frozen solid, and the frog was inside this block of ice. And a parent came up to me when I was looking at it and asked me if it was going to be okay, and I said, yeah, I'm sure, really thinking that it was dead and I would have to try and dispose of the body. And I came back at lunchtime when nobody was around to get rid of the body, and the frog was hopping around happy as anything. And so since then we've had 2 master's students do their research on these frogs to try and work out how they can actually withstand being totally frozen solid in winter.
Do they use similar methods to the wood frog, which doesn't freeze because it has urea, a high concentration of that in its blood?
Yeah, it's similar, but they use glycerol, so it's like an antifreeze that as they start to get cold, they upregulate the glycerol into their cells, which protects all the cells from ice crystals forming in them, and they can manage to freeze solid like that.
That's pretty cool. What was the other discovery?
So the other one that we discovered were, this was during a translocation of the Archie's frog, and we discovered that Archie's frogs can cure themselves with the chytrid fungus. And then this was pretty important because it then established how we should deal with the chytrid fungus in a lot of these populations. And we discovered this, and again it was almost by accident, that I was doing research on chytrid fungus at the time. Department of Conservation wanted to do a big translocation, which they did, and they found out of all the frogs that were going to be translocated that 13 of them were infected with the chytrid fungus. So they didn't really know what to do with them. They could have just killed them, but they sent them to me down here to do some research on. And I was working with a type of antibiotic at the time to see if I could cure the frogs of the chytrid fungus. So I set up a whole load of trials, and I performed all these trials, and of course, like all good scientific experiments, you have to have a control where you just leave the frogs and you don't do anything to them. And when I came to the end of the experiment and I swabbed all the frogs to do PCR to see if they had the chytrid fungus on them, none of them did. So even the controls had managed to cure themselves. And so we wrote a couple of papers there, and I had a student who then went on and collected all the different species of native frogs in New Zealand and infected them all with chytrid fungus. And then we just watched them because we had developed a way to cure them if they started to become sick. And we just watched them, and the Hofstadter's frogs got rid of the chytrid fungus almost immediately within 2 weeks. And the other ones were a little bit slower, but by 11 or 12 weeks, all the species of frogs that we had cured themselves of chytrid fungus.
That's pretty crazy, especially for such a devastating disease, really.
Yeah, one of the things that we felt was that the chytrid fungus is an ancient fungus. So it's similar to our frogs. Our frogs are an ancient genus of frogs, and the chytrid is an ancient fungus. So they've probably met a couple of times in evolutionary time, and that's why they've developed this resistance to the fungus.
Sort of like a bit of an arms race between them.
Yeah.
Of parasite and prey.
Yeah, and they've learned to coexist.
That's really cool. So, what's your favourite animal, or like one of the many?
One of the many, well, probably one of my favourite animals are bound to be frogs. So I've got some favourite frog species. If I wasn't going to work on frogs, I think I really like seagulls for some reason. So I'm very interested in the gulls that we have in Dunedin. I've been watching a couple of gull colonies recently, just bringing up their chicks and things like that. But with frogs, I've got a favourite frog which is called Hylocertus Prince Charlesii, and it's called Prince Charlesii because sort of as a publicity stunt, we named it after Prince Charles, and it's an absolutely amazing frog. It's sort of a black frog with bright orange spots all over it, and it's a big tree frog from South America. Got big toe discs on its fingers. It's very slow moving. A really stunning frog.
That's really cool. What do you think are some of the most interesting adaptations frogs have, like unique ways of solving problems?
Yeah, that's a good question, and really wherever you look at any kind of ecological problems, frogs have solved it. One of the ones that I've really enjoyed working on have been the giant African bullfrogs, which are really big. They're about 1.5–2 kilograms, and they're really big frogs, and they live most of their life underground in a cocoon. So they live in the Highveld in South Africa, and there it's very, very dry during winter, and they get summer rains and they get torrential downpours in the summer. So what the frog actually does is that it during the end of the rainy season, it digs a hole and it goes down into the soil, and it starts to secrete a cocoon, and it's a waterproof cocoon. And this cocoon then envelops the whole body. The frog heartbeat really slows down, and it basically dehydrates. And if you were to dig it up, it's like an inanimate object. It's like a fossil, and it's hard. It's like a rock. And then what you can do is that you can just chuck it in a bucket of water, and you get like an instant big frog. And that's what happens. They spend all their time underground in the very dry conditions. As soon as the rain filters through, they then burst out of their cocoon. They dig themselves up above the surface. They eat, they breed, and then they bury themselves again. Quite amazing. So really good adaptation.